Really? I have no idea what that was all about.
Well,
Oh, my
maybe
stream is starting though. Oh, go figure. All right. Well,
I need the link again, though.
for the article.
Yeah.
Okay, apparently we're live now for whatever reason. So let me hopefully try to get the article back up on the screen. Um, Go figure that I would have it set up and then for whatever reason it would remove itself from. Oh, why is Skype on there? Get out!
Oh
Damn it!
no.
Ah, oh, shit! Really? Okay, there we go. Okay, so
Finally.
yeah, that what a great start to the stream here. Unfortunately, people probably saw my contact list, but what can you do? Um, all right, so anyway, we're gonna take a look at this article here on Salon. Um, I'm a pedophile, but not a monster. I'm attracted to children, but unwilling to act on it. Before judging me harshly, would you be willing to listen? By Todd
Well,
Nickerson.
I imagine Sigmund Freud might.
I read through this article yesterday, and it gets kind of screwy. I guess I'll try to like read off a section at a time, and then we can, throw in whatever commentary we want, and try to get through the whole entire thing because it's pretty lengthy. Okay. Anyway, let's dive right into what happens when social justice tries too hard to create acceptance.
On Salon, of course.
Woo!
All right. I was born without my right hand. As a child, this deformity quickly set me apart from my peers. In public, I wore a prosthesis? What? Prosthetis?
Prosthesis.
Prosthesis? Why did I say that wrong? An intimidating object to other youngsters because of its resemblance to a pirate's hook. So, like, he's an adult now and he's searching for his Peter Pan. Even so, I wore it every day. I felt inadequate without it. I was shy, uncoordinated, and terrible at sports, all of which put me on the outs with other boys my age. But I was good at drawing and making up stories for my own entertainment, and I spent more and more time in my own head, being a space adventurer or monster wrangler or whatever character I could think up. Well, at the very least, he had a normal childhood as far as imagination goes, because now you get expelled from school for having an imagination. These
And
would
for having being left-handed. So.
Yeah, these would ultimately prove to be useful skills, but for now, they only serve to further alienate me from other kids. On top of it all, I still struggled with bladder control, likely due to my heaping pile of insecurities, to which this problem only added more well into my elementary school years. Bladder control is politically correct for wetting yourself, of course.
Of course,
Well,
you could just not have been toilet trained well, but
does he necessarily mean like wetting the bed, or like he would just?
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like he's making it sound like he just urinated himself, which sounds like some other sort of medical issue.
which plenty of kids in elementary school would do for insecurity. So far, this is nothing revolutionary or noteworthy.
No, but you'll note that he started it off with I was born without my right hand, so it's kind of like framing it for a sympathetic route.
Yeah,
Well,
I really
just
don't know what that has to do with it at
like
all.
like granted that is a terrible thing and it's obviously creates a challenge in your life, but does that excuse you for being interested in children? The answer is
right.
no.
That my first question was, what does that have to do with you trying to nail little children?
Well, thinking about nailing little children.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. He did learn a little bit of psychology there.
But none of this would compare to the final insult the universe would deal me. I've been stuck with the most unfortunate of sexual orientations. A preference for a group of people who are legally, morally, and psychologically unable to reciprocate my feelings and desires. It's a
Consented?
curse. No consent, hashtag. It's a curse of the first order, a completely unworkable sexuality, and it's mine. Who am I? Nice to meet you. My name is Todd Nickerson, and I'm a pedophile. Does that surprise you? Yeah, not many of us are willing to share our story for good reason. To confess a sexual attraction to children is to lay claim to the most reviled status on the planet, one that effectively ends any chance you have of living a normal life. Yet
Unless you're
I'm
ancient Greek.
Yet I'm not the monster you think me to be. I've never touched a child sexually in my life and never will, nor do I use child pornography. So, okay, since when did being sexually attracted to children become a sexual orientation? Like, as far as I knew, children wasn't an orientation, it was like an age group. Because, like, you've got gay, you've got straight, you've got bisexual, and we're not going to get into the Tumblr sexualities.
Yeah. I think I don't know what to say about that. You can probably say it's an orientation, but I don't see how you could say fully it's an orientation unless he is unwilling to have sex with people his age or people of legal age.
Right.
So in that sense, I don't think it's an orientation. I think it's more of like I have a preference for children.
Something that is also important to like differentiate though is when people say children, what age group are we talking about? Because like if you look at the whole thing with the Jared the Subway guy, there were young girls, but what, they were like 16, 17. To me, that's not exactly a child. I mean, it's still wrong legally in some places, but it's not a kid, because a kid to me is like, it's prepubescent.
Well, I had an NCO get charged with having child pornography, but it turned out it was just women that looked young.
Okay.
It was legal women that just dressed up like teenagers is all it was. And all of us have seen stuff like that on legal websites that is legal. So I think that's also still just a preference. I like women that look younger, and I don't know. I remember people were trying to kick his ass because of that, and I was like, look, he wasn't charged with anything. Like, he went to court and was like, these women are legal, and they're like, oh yeah, you're right. So
What were we thinking? No, that was that's what they would do on that. What was that show called?
How to Catch a Predator or something?
Yeah, where Chris Hansen comes in and he's like, "Have a
Please
seat."
sit down. Yeah, have a seat.
And then they run out, and then there are 50 police officers that jungle them in the driveway.
and then somehow dodge all the entrapment charges.
And so at the very end of this statement, he's like, I've never touched a child sexually in my life and never will. So are we supposed to just like take his word for it?
I would, just from the absence of evidence.
Right. Now, but if I were someone with a child, I sure as hell wouldn't.
Yeah,
Like,
course.
it's not worth the risk, Like some random stranger that wants my sympathy. Oh, please trust me, I won't touch your kid. No thanks. To me, that makes the most sense, like common sense wise. So he may very well be telling the truth, but sane people that actually have children, probably wouldn't want to risk that.
Yeah, well, I see this as like a mental illness,
Right.
which I'm pretty sure in like 20, 30 years, people, who knows what would happen. But I think something like this just needs psychiatric help. And I think we'll find out more about that later in the article for sure.
But isn't that the definition of a pedophile, you may ask? Someone who molests kids. Not really. Although pedophile and child molester have often been used interchangeably in the media, it's just that pesky media demonizing them. There is some overlap. At base, a pedophile is someone who's sexually attracted to children. That's it. There's no inherent reason he must act on those desires with real children. Some pedophiles certainly do, but many of us don't, because the powerful taboo keeps us in hiding. It's impossible to know how many non-offending pedophiles are out there, but signs indicate there are a lot of us, and too often we suffer in silence. That's why I decided to speak up. I see a little bit of self-victimization here. I mean, obviously the ramifications of being sexually attracted to children. So it is something. I mean, and clearly it's something that he knows is wrong, because he's saying, I will never act on it. So how could you expect there to be anything but a taboo on it? I mean, it's something you should keep in silence, you know?
Well, I think some sympathy can be warranted. Like, I'm taking this as a sign of like I don't want to see this guy as a monster because of what is going on in his head. But some sympathy, I think there's, I would say there's probably a lot of pedophiles that are afraid to say, I need help because they're afraid once they go to a doctor, they're going to be labeled as, a sex offender for not actually doing anything.
Right. I mean, it's a
That's like when drug addicts are afraid to get help a lot of times when there's community outreaches because they feel like either they're going to get arrested or something's going to happen where they're going to get penalized instead of just letting them get better.
right. I mean, there definitely does need to be somewhere for these people to reach out to so that they can get proper help. But at the same time, I I don't ever see it as a good thing to like normalize this thing and just be like, oh well, they just happen to like children. It's okay.
Well, for one, like for me, it's just I would rather know the monster than to close my eyes and pretend it's not there.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. But I think the best thing to do is try to fix it rather than flat out accept.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
these are people that need to acknowledge, hey, I have a problem and this isn't good. Therefore, I need to do whatever I can to fix that.
But I also think that you should try to commend the people that do try to seek help. Of course, there's going to be a taboo because we love our children. If you have kids, you love them and try your best to keep them away from danger.
Right.
You don't want your kids like to, jump into a pool without proper swimwear. Same sense. You don't want your kids to be with strangers that can potentially harm them.
Right.
And I would definitely agree that should not change. But if somebody says, "Hey, I have a problem,"
Yeah. And I
it's really
mean,
hard. It's really hard to do stuff like that. Like even if it's not related to this, having a problem, it's very hard to even just say to yourself, "I need to get help."
yeah, I mean, I will admit that if it's somebody that hasn't really acted on it and they know that it's a terrible thing and they need some kind of help to overcome it, that's completely different than somebody that's just like trying to say, this is my interest and you need to normalize it and that's that.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
So
definitely.
that's totally different.
Yeah, definitely should not normalize the thought, but just you know keep it out there as like, look, if you need help, just seek it for everyone's sake. Just seek help.
Right. The discovery of an alternate sexuality. Many gays begin to recognize their sexual preferences sometime around puberty. If I was gay, I'd probably be mad that he's like throwing this in here.
Yeah, there's definitely not a correlation with these.
If not before. For me, it was the same. I was about 12 when the first inklings of a sexual preference bubbled up in me, though at the time I thought little of it. As I turned 13, it occurred to me that I initially took as a phase had begun to solidify into something more troubling. Even so, at this point, I could still convince myself that I was within the realm of normalcy. Then something happened that all but removed my ability to continue this self denial. My eureka moment. One day, as I was sketching in my grandparents' living room, a neighbor of theirs came to visit with his 7-year-old daughter in tow. At first, I hadn't noticed her because she was quiet. I only heard my grandpa and his neighbor chatting in the kitchen while I sketched. Soon the little girl walked into the dining room and stood at the archway entrance to the living room, watching me draw. I can still see her today in my mind's eye. Oh boy. Dressed in blue jeans and a nearly matching denim jacket, with pristine blue eyes and a halo of wispy blonde curls framing her face. She seemed somehow larger than life and almost ancient in the way she stood so perfectly still. Then, just like that, she was gone. She and her father left. That singular moment, though it could scarcely have lasted more than a few minutes, has become seared into my memory. I kind of felt dirty reading that. like,
If only there was a face cam on me right now.
like,
My eyes are bulging.
wow, that's, I'm gonna have to shower after this article.
That was a little cringeworthy right there.
Uh, I mean, it's important to note, like, he's saying he started to notice this at, like, 12, but, I mean, at 12 years old, do you really have that much of a, I don't know, of an awareness of, like, age difference and like
I didn't. And 12.
attraction and stuff. I mean, I don't know. Like technically, 7 and 12 years old are like 5 years apart, and I know that there's differences in growth between those 5 years, but it's like kids don't usually have these deep relationships that an adult would have. So
Uh, yeah, and I don't know. I think just from the way he was addressing this, it seems like he's caught up in
yeah, like
past.
the way he's writing it now, it's like I don't know. It's like he's more interested now than he was at that point.
Yeah, for sure. And I can remember times like when I
Like
went to
him.
Disneyland, I can explain my trip to Disneyland like he explained this.
Yeah,
It feels like he's almost trying to make himself seem like something. Like
And
he tries to paint this this very vivid story that's like, okay, are you just saying that just to make something up so you people can feel like you have something and you can be different, or especially because what that subtitle's like, the alternate sexuality or something like that.
yeah, that's a little weird. Oh God. So next title, he touched me.
yeah, I read up to this.
So how had this happened? Well, I have a pretty good idea. When I was 7 years old, I was fondled in the front yard of my grandparents' home by a man I barely knew. It was a one-time event in my life, and not a particularly traumatic one, which is a little bit disturbing. A man I'll call Hans, a German who was acquainted with my uncle and aunt from when they lived in Nuremberg, had come to visit America. He spent a day and a night at their place, and they lived next door to my family along with my grandparents, who shared their two-story brick house. This is awfully wordy, like, just get to it. That,
Yeah.
that day, the man lingered in the house with my grandma, who was stuck with him while everyone else had gone to work, and as neither could speak the other's language, it quickly became uncomfortable for both. Well, apparently, touching children is the universal language. Grammy.
God.
Sorry, someone's gonna take like a soundbite of that, and I'm gonna be so fucked. Grammy's solution was to send Hans outside with one of the grandkids. As I happened to be in the room at the time, I was assigned the task. Take him out and show him Papa's garden, she told me. Tell him the names of the vegetables. Why do I feel like there's a cucumber joke in here somewhere? He'd probably enjoy that. I agreed. Besides, even though I knew not a whit of German, I was very much at ease in Hans's presence. He was painfully thin, with a messy mop of hair and large glasses. I should point out that the men in my life, including my father, were gruff blue-collar types who could intimidate me. Hans was different. He was a beta male. I mean, gentle, soft-spoken, and appealingly awkward, a lot like me.
Freudian slip.
No, I did that on purpose. It's just... I took the man's right hand with my left, my good hand, or only existing hand, according to you, and led him out into the garden, which took up most of the front lawn at my grandparents' place. I escorted my new friend down the rows of veggies, calling out each one as we passed it, and Hans would gleefully parrot the names. This went on until we made our way through the entire garden. I was proud to find myself educating an adult rather than the other way around. Well, just wait. When the English lesson was over, Hans plopped himself down on a patch of earth near the garden and patted the spot next to him, indicating he wanted me to sit there. I did. I couldn't believe this peculiar man I barely knew was so eager to connect with me. The weird little kid nobody liked. It felt good. For long minutes, we simply enjoyed each other's company. Then, out of the blue, Hans slipped a hand into my shorts. Jesus. Even though we were only about 30 feet from the poorly paved country road that meandered through this stretch of country. This went on for several minutes. I was confused but not frightened or troubled. The only thing I could think to say while this was happening was pee-pee. Continuing the English lesson with my pet name for my genitalia, even in the midst of my own abuse. Hans chortled and repeated the word pee-pee. Oh my god, that's so awkward. Eventually this came to an end, and Hans, having gotten what he wanted, shooed me away. I can't imagine why it didn't occur to him that I would immediately rat him out. Maybe he knew and just didn't care. Anyway, he could hardly ask me not to, could he? I raced back to Grammy and promptly informed her of what had happened. She deliberated over what to do, in the end asking me to keep it a secret from everyone, including my parents, and ordering me to stay away from Hans. No authorities were called, and life went on as usual. Hans stayed that evening with my uncle and aunt and left the next day. I never saw him again. That's actually pretty disturbing and kind of totally messed up that like the grandmother just decided to bury it than actually like help her own grandson, because
Yeah,
I don't think it should have gone the Legend of Zelda. It's a secret to everyone route. And I mean, there's also I guess at this point he can really say that I need an adult just doesn't work. But
Yeah,
this,
grabbing your Triforce and Master Sword is definitely not a thing that should happen when and kept in secret. You know.
I mean, it's just so damn creepy. Like, he's talking, oh, I went and named off all the vegetables, and he parroted each word. Then we're sitting there, and he grabs me in my shorts, and I say pee-pee, and he copies that, too. It's just so disturbing.
yeah,
Are we
that
should. Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
it just seems random and out of place for somebody to do something like that. Like the person himself, well, obviously if he did it, he's not right in the head, but uh, it just seems like this person is already himself has other psychological or maybe developmental issues because that doesn't seem like a natural thing to do.
Well, this almost seems like a poorly written fan fiction
Yeah, I want to say, like,
because
it's
there's
almost
things that
like
doesn't
there.
make sense.
Yeah, and it's almost like there's some sort of nostalgia in it with the way it's written.
It's
But
like,
it can't be a fanfic because there's no Peter Griffin sex scenes in it. So
Peter
I'm
Pan
gonna
and
hold
fuck.
I'm gonna hold out until I hear some more convincing evidence.
Or maybe Sonic fan characters or something.
Oh boy,
Kevin the Hedgehog.
or maybe Sonichu.
Ultimate causes. It's easy to assume that pedophilia is always the result of some early sexualization or abuse, and certainly there seems to be a connection in some cases. I like how he says some cases when it basically captures his experience, you know? Like, I could see if he was somebody that didn't experience any sexual abuse, and then also happened to have this inclination towards children, and then was like, well, it's not always like that. But he's like somebody that fits under that category.
It's like ignore what I just told you. Some people. Well, I think he's trying to say that like this is an. It seems like he's trying to say this is a natural thing, which I don't think is true.
The
No.
story doesn't even sound natural.
No, like
Yeah.
what childhood experience is like that and you're not like slightly disturbed? Like, I don't know. Even if my grandmother told me to be quiet, that night when I go home with my parents, I'm sure as hell saying something. And I know that certain kids will clam up and be afraid and like, well, that's my grandma, so that's my mom or dad's parent, and so maybe they won't believe me over them. So there is that factor to keep in mind too, but it's just like he seemed to say that he wasn't bothered by this behavior at all.
Like,
He
oh,
was like-
just another day in the
Guarded.
hand or crotch grabbing circuit here.
Grabbing nice. But I don't know. It seems like with this mentality, he's trying to say that this is a normal like thing for most people. Like being gay
Yeah.
is normal for but this is not. You can't like mistreat people this way. I mean, homosexuality still has consent involved.
Right.
Pedophilia is an action that has no consent, and yes, there is a difference between being a pedophile and molesting children. It's just in the same way that you can be gay and still have sex with women.
Right.
But pedophilia in itself has no basis. You can't have a relationship with a child. You are supposed to be the adult. You have that power dynamic over that child as you are the adult.
Right. Like psychologically they are not developed enough to the point where they're an equal with you.
Yeah. It's about as normal as being sexually attracted to inanimate objects.
Just wait, there will be an article on that soon enough.
Which I can
there
agree
was
with,
that
sure.
table incident.
Oh god.
But
Oh, the guy in Florida or something?
I think I don't know where it was, but Florida.
I feel like it's Florida.
Let's be honest. If somebody said Florida, nobody would think twice about it.
However, evidence suggests that there's no magic bullet that pedophilia can be traced back to. For every pedophile who was sexually abused as a child, there's another who wasn't. I'd really like to see the stats on that one. Likewise, most abuse victims never manifest pedophilic desires. Some researchers surmise that pedophilia can be traced back to genetics. Others believe the cause is congenital, and still others that it's environmental. Personally, I think the ultimate cause is likely some combination of those, and that it varies from person to person. Another issue is the role feelings of inadequacy play in forming our sexuality. Pedophilia may not arise from such fears, otherwise there'd be a lot more pedophiles, but those fears can certainly reinforce it. Oh boy. I think it's safe to say that many pedophiles have deep-seated feelings of inferiority in one way or another, or at least we did when our sexuality was forming, and this becomes a downward spiral during puberty and beyond. Anything can be the trigger of this: disabilities, weight issues, or just general feelings of unattractiveness to peers. So, let me get this straight. Rather than, like, lose weight or try to, I don't know, be in a community where, like, you can meet other people with disabilities, you develop an attraction to children? I mean, that just sounds like somebody realizing that they're inadequate to adults, so they're going to take advantage of what they can.
Yeah, and I've heard it said this way, like a lot of pedophiles are caught up in being a kid and feeling inadequacies of being a child, so they're caught in that mindset, that childlike mindset, like the Peter Pan syndrome sort of thing, like Michael Jackson,
Right.
stuff like that. They want to be around kids. They feel more comfortable around kids, um, and stuff like that. Which, wanting to take care of kids is one thing. Wanting to have a relationship with a kid is a completely different affair.
Yeah, because, like, I could say I don't feel my age. I feel young at heart. I do, like, things that would arguably, be reserved for children in some people's eyes. But there's like an extreme difference between, feeling young at heart and then, like, taking that to the extreme of, well, since I feel young at heart, I feel most comfortable around children, so it only makes sense to have a relationship with a child.
Yeah. Well, for like people like us, we like video games, we like comic books, we
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
But for me, it's for I would guess you guys too. It's like going back to our past reading comic books that we read as a kid. That was our like gateway back to our childhood. For these guys, it's just like the social life almost is like I feel more connected with kids. I want to be around kids, but they still have their adult tendencies.
And I'll even say, you know what? I'll even give them this. Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be around kids and, like, care for kids because, you've got people, obviously, that are interested in teaching kindergarten or daycare centers and whatnot, and that's fine. But the problem comes in where you're like, well, I'm also going to aim my sexual attraction at them.
Like in the meantime, I'm also going to prey on children. No, no, no.
No.
That's not how the system works.
These feelings can be influential on one's developing sexuality, such that even the severe cultural taboo is not enough to override it. Indeed, the taboo itself can negatively influence these vulnerable children. I recall an event from when I was 11, sitting in the family Jeep with my dad and his friend Andy, when a news piece on the radio reported the sexual abuse of a girl, to which my dad said to his friend something like, "They should take people like that and place weights on top of their genitals until they smash."
I'm
Pretty.
sure. I'm sure that's how a blue collar guy talks, just like that.
Yeah, I have a feeling he probably said something along they should just, like, stomp out his dick or, But you know what? That's, I mean, think about that though. This, he's not thinking about, like, this is a father. He's sitting in the vehicle with his 11-year-old kid. Obviously, he's going to take that approach to this kind of situation. And you know what? I mean, sexual abuse of a young girl, that's messed up. It's not an excusable thing as far as I'm concerned. Pretty horrific imagery of an 11-year-old to process, and I couldn't help but sympathize with the abuser. After all, I could recall my own molestation perfectly, and I hardly felt it warranted that kind of response, which is exactly why you're too young to understand these things. Like, that, oh my god.
Yeah. Um. Well, it seems like he's trying to say the reaction to women, girl victims of molestation and boy victims of molestations are like two different things, and I think he's trying to say how that's bad, and I can't agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if he goes over it later in the article. But we should treat, people that molest boys and girls the same. And I know for a fact that that was a really bad problem a few years back, like beginning of the internet age. Like boys were getting molested a lot more than girls, and no one would do anything about it because they were just like, no, I don't want to hear about it.
Well,
Um,
plus we're in this era of stupidity where people are arguing that it's impossible to sexually abuse boys in the first place.
Right, because they always
So
want it or something like that.
right, right.
yeah.
So there's an issue with trying to destroy that narrative, and then actually acknowledging it and taking it seriously because I can't remember what it was, but I read an article because there's been just a large stream of teachers preying on their students and having sex with them. And sure enough, with when there was a teenage boy who was the victim, even though the boy was like, I'm not interested, I don't want it. It didn't take but 5 seconds to scroll down to the comments section, and there were no shortage of troglodytes saying, "Oh, he asked for it and he wanted it anyway. I don't know what he's getting so worked up about."
Well, I would be the first one to say, like, it may not be politically correct, but boys that were victimized by women and girls that were victimized by men may have different outcomes, but I believe that they have the same effect. Like, what do you expect from a boy who was like 8 years old, had sex with a fucking Cowboys cheerleader? What do you think will happen to him? He may not realize that he's fucked up, but he's gonna get older. It's gonna fuck with his brain. Like,
Yeah, like regardless of how he might feel about it, even the kids that are like all for it, like, you've got the 15-year-olds out there that genuinely are like, yeah, I'd like to nail my teacher, but they
yeah.
shouldn't actually do it, and obviously there are emotional consequences to such acts, whether they think there are or not.
And do you think these kids are gonna respect women of authority later on? They're just gonna remember that time that they were able to bang their teacher. Like, that's a power dynamic that the teacher destroyed. You
Apparently,
know?
they should write about this on Everyday Feminism because they seem to enjoy writing about power dynamics in the bedroom.
Oh yeah.
Ah.
I see
Well,
power dynamics is definitely something completely different. They do.
Yeah, the bile has only manipulated, multiplied since then, and I believe all that hatred just serves to reinforce pedophilia in youngsters predisposed to it. I don't know about that. It's a form of cognitive bias called the backfire effect or polarization. Everyone does this to some extent. When challenged on deeply held beliefs, no matter how uncertain or incorrect they may be, we tend to dig in our heels. So basically, the internet. With sexuality, that effect is likely magnified because there's a physiological component, a drive every bit as powerful as belief. In essence, your brain knows what it likes and isn't going to take no for an answer. So your brain is a rapist. For that reason, the nature or nurture question with respect to sexual preference is ultimately irrelevant. It becomes all but hardwired soon enough, until it's all you know. And it's self-reinforcing. No matter how much you wish to dig it out, eventually it all tangles together with the rest of who you are.
Um, the nature and nurture thing. I don't know if you guys know about that. Nature is something that's like genetic.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, nature would be you like for sexual orientation, nature would be you were born gay. There's nothing you could have done
Right, it's part of
to
your
change it.
genetics, it's part of your biology. Nurture is more of your how you were raised, your upbringing, your environment.
Yeah, and I don't
Yeah,
see how
I've
that
heard it
has.
used more commonly in the social Darwinist approach of, oh, those coloreds are just so inferior, and
Well,
so it's always it's the environment. Well, no, they're just naturally predisposed to being inferior beings or something like that.
well, I would say it like this. Like, you could be a timid person, but I'd say if you're just like the way you incorporate sexuality, I would say would be your nurture. Your sexual orientation for sure can be nature, but the way you go about it would be your nurture. So let's say you're gay, but you are a bear, like buff ass man dude. That's gonna be your nurture. You were nurtured to be more, be more that way, even though
Right.
you know. Um, it could be wrong about that, but I don't. I just don't see how that has to what at all that has to do with this.
Well, he's also trying to be like, oh, well, the more you tell these kids that pedophilia is wrong, the more they're gonna want to do it because fuck you, dad. Like, no, this isn't the same thing as
This isn't Girls Gone Wild.
Yeah, like this isn't the same thing as like, well, you're not dating till you're 18 kind of thing, and where the girl will go and rebel and sleep with everybody under the sun. I mean, this is like,
God bless them.
well, we'll talk about daddy issues some other time. It's just the way he's framing it. It's like it's trying to normalize, and like we've been saying, while there's a place for people to kind of admit to the fact that they have this issue, the ultimate goal is to repair them to a point where they can function normally in society rather than bowing down and just being like, well, this is normal and let's let it go at that.
or bowing out, as it were. Yeah, this. I mean, this is just. It feels like this is just one giant apology for pedophilia, and there's no. I mean, he says it as if to acknowledge, okay, I know that everybody says it's illegal, but that's really the attitude that it comes off as. I know everybody says it's illegal, and not and it's morally reprehensible. Not this is wrong, and this is something I would like to change, but it's difficult for me to reconcile those feelings. I don't get that
Yeah.
impression at all. I mean, he's
Right.
painting a very romantic picture of, oh, this was my first experience and my first time, and I can, I could do the same thing on the other side of the coin, given that I have a preference for older women. But if I were 12 and they were 22, it's still a problem.
Right.
Yeah. I think he understands that it's illegal, but I don't think he understands why it's illegal. He doesn't understand that you, as an adult, like the reason why it's illegal is you have the nurture. You're not supposed. Okay, I've already explained it, and I don't want to repeat myself too much. But yeah, you're ahead of this child on the maturity level.
Or at least you're supposed to be.
You can be childlike, but you still have to understand that there's boundaries between children and adults. That
Well, now we're going to get schooled. Th- Things went along okay until I was 2 years away from graduating college. I began to smoke pot, a drug I'd experimented with after high school, but didn't much care for then. I didn't like it the second time around either. It made me anxious more often than not, but I did it anyway, largely because many people I respected smoked it, and I wanted to be more like them. So why don't you try to be more like other people and not want to bang kids? I was trying desperately to reshape my identity before I was thrown out into the real world. I'd even begun working out, lifting weights, and exercising to get in better shape. On the outside, I might have seemed pretty normal, but on the inside, I was screaming in terror at the prospect of having to grow up and be normal. I mean, that's a lot of people, though, which to me meant getting a real job, finding a girlfriend, eventually getting married, and raising a family. Oh, I wanted to be normal, believe me. Yet I knew myself well enough to know I wouldn't be able to carry that charade off for long, and every fiber of my being resisted the forced transformation.
I don't know too many kids that go around pumping iron. Just to put that out there.
I mean, I guess a lot of people get into it early college age, from what I've seen. And then you've got the kids on the football team or whatever that tend to work out, I guess. But to me, what he's talking about here, it's screaming at in terror at the prospect of having to grow up and such. I think we all experience that to some extent. So to frame that as, I don't know, as some kind of justification or reasoning why oh, I still like children even though this is happening. I don't know, it's just weird.
well, I wouldn't mind talking to this guy to get a better understanding of what he means because he doesn't talk about his age during the incidents with the German guy. Now he does, and I've noticed he talks about his age.
Oh, during the
several
during the
times.
during the thing with the German guy, he said he was 7 years old.
7, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't
I
know if you
missed that.
missed that. But the other thing is here he's saying oh, I wanted to be normal, blah blah blah. But why didn't he go to a therapist or something, I mean, yes, you could say, oh, I was afraid to admit I had these feelings, but the whole point of a therapist's job is to listen to you and not judge and try to help you.
Yeah. Um, he's talking about being having to grow up 2 years from graduating college. Okay, I thought he was talking about high school.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I still don't know what this has to do with his point though. It's like
No,
almost like the claw.
yeah, I think it's all just it's all fluff in an effort to like garner sympathy towards the situation, and not to say that it deserves none in some sense, but you gotta like he's gotta understand that people are gonna have a real hard time sympathizing with a guy that while
Yeah.
says he's having a problem still doesn't seem to acknowledge why it's a problem.
Yeah, he's not gonna gain sympathy. He would have a better like I guess a better response from this if he just said, "Look, these are the facts as I know them as having this condition," and all this fluff is just like kind of just pointless. It's just I have these urges, and I want people to be more open to seeking help with these urges to
Mm-hmm.
possibly help me as well as an individual. But him having his right arm removed or being born without a right arm, his dad talking about stomping some guy's nuts, uh, it, smoking pot. I mean, sure, but we don't need to know your life story.
After graduation, I fell into the deepest pit of despair imaginable, one that lasted several years, and I've only just begun to pull myself out of it. You can't experience that much blind terror and pain for that long without being seriously impacted by it. I still worked out every other day, so I was hurting constantly since depression saps your brain of the feel-good chemicals that helps to counteract pain. But I felt something, and that was better than the emotional numbness that had overtaken me. Thus, my project to remake myself into a regular person a complete failure. I retreated inward like a kicked dog, often spending days on end in my bedroom. At the nadir of my depression, I was contemplating suicide daily. Some days I could think of little else. I found some relief in opiates, oh boy, which I had to obtain
Ugh.
illegally because doctors won't prescribe them for depression and anxiety. You think? The occasional hydrocodone gave me a moment of respite from the agony I was going through. I'd tried antidepressants, but they were a joke. But that damn hydrocodone, that's good shit.
Just stick with MDMA, man.
Oh my god.
I'm not gonna say anything about drugs. They're bad. Marijuana, I would say, has definitely helped me a little bit. So I can't really say anything bad about that. But probably not with this situation. I have anxiety, so
Well, and he claimed he tried it and it gave him anxiety. So I mean, for to each their own. Like everybody reacts differently to these things.
yeah. Definitely like the last thing you should ever do when you're depressed is self-medicate.
Yeah, like come on, you're saying, oh, contemplating suicide, need release, need something. Well, therapy still an option. I mean, you're at the point of buying illegal drugs.
Yeah, and I can say like antidepressants, like they don't always work, sure, but there's different types of antidepressants.
Right. I mean,
There's
there's
different
other
types of
options.
pretty much antidepressants are stimulus that go to your brain, and sometimes they stimulate wrong parts of the brain that can have a negative effect on you and make your depression worse. But most of the time, ADHD and depression is just a chemical imbalance that can be treated with persistence, which is hard when you're depressed.
Yeah. In the midst of that dark era in my life, I discovered an unhealthy pedophile forum, as opposed to a completely healthy one. Nothing illegal was happening there, but many of its most influential members were pro-contactors, meaning they believed that sex with children was theoretically okay and supported the elimination of age of consent laws. Wow. That forum still exists, and I won't name it here, but yet I want sympathy. But suffice it to say, I found myself taking up the same pro-contactor chance, if only to feel like I belonged somewhere. At the time, it was all that was available in terms of an actual pedophile community, and I had nothing left to lose by joining the cause. Misguided though it was, and even decided to out myself on that forum. Over the ensuing years, though, I was often at odds with the pro-contactors and flitted in and out of their clique. I wanted desperately to be friends with people who shared my sexual orientation, even if they held crazed beliefs, but I could never quite reconcile with their viewpoint. This is a little weird. Like, he knows the name of the forum, won't name it to protect these people, yet is in sort of like in this limbo process where, oh, it's wrong and I don't hold their viewpoints and stuff. But and I understand, like, on a completely general viewpoint, I understand, you want to be friends with people who are similar to you, but to the point where you're like, oh, even if they held crazy beliefs, I mean, crazy beliefs implies bad.
Um, there was a Joe Rogan podcast where they talked to a guy that outed some of these boards because nobody would do anything about it.
Hmm.
And this he was another comedian. I can't remember his name. I was just trying to quickly look it up because it reminded me of it. But I could probably look it up for you and give it to you a little bit later. But it's like a 2-hour podcast.
Sure.
But this guy had to pretend to be a little boy to out some of these guys, get information, and turn it into the FBI to even get these guys to even get in trouble for what they were doing. Like, they were trying to actively look for children on the internet
Yeah.
back in like the 90s to have sex with.
Jeez.
And not just, say stupid little stories to, but to actually con into relationships and stuff. So
And then it's somewhat of maybe a nitpick on my part, but it really bothers me when they take these concepts and, like, oh, and then they put community at the end of it, like, oh, pedophile community. I'm surprised they haven't said pedophile culture yet.
Well, culture always has a negative connotation, so it's always going to be community for
Oh, that's
things
right,
that
because you got rape culture and
right
things of that
and
nature.
culture of I don't know whatever it is, culture of to- toxicity or something.
Something like that. Not long after I self-outed, a group of web vigilantes called Perverted Justice showed up. You've probably heard of them. They're the people behind the now defunct TV show To Catch a Predator and Have a Seat. I was no predator, but that mattered not one iota to these guys. They lumped me together with the child rapists and internet creeps just the same. Well, like, why do you think they did that? They see these people on this board in this community, as you put it, talking about these, disturbing things, and they're not going to know whether or not you're one of the people that acted on it or not. I mean, this is like, these are people trying to keep kids safe. And so in that regard, I can't really blame them. Like, you got to know that even if you consider yourself anonymous, and, like, in this case it obviously wasn't because he said he outed himself, you got to be responsible for what it is you're saying. So if you go out there and you say these are your interests and you know the so-called social stigma behind it, then be prepared for what might happen to you if you put yourself out there like that. Because this is not a group of people that's going to sit around and be like, oh, well, have you ever touched a little boy? And they're like, no. Okay, carry on. Because, I mean, who would have thought that somebody willing to touch a child might also lie about it? Drives me nuts. As I was already out of the closet as a pedo, I was an easy target, becoming one of the first people they profiled on their Wikisposure page, a site devoted to outing online pedos whether they'd broken any laws or not. It has since changed hands but still exists online, buried in a dark corner of the internet. Kind of like the place where your forum should be. And yep, I'm still on it. Not that I much
So
care anymore.
R9K?
Yeah. Perverted Justice had their day, but they eventually burned their own house down. Back when they were in full effect, however, they managed to make my already miserable existence that much more miserable. After the expose came out, I was fired from my job at Lowe's. Well, not too surprising because, I mean, in this day and age, you've got people fired for so-called racist tweets and stuff, so
Did he really have to inform us that he works at Lowe's?
I guess so. But at
Like
least...
it just reminds me. It's like it's like when people used to make these parodies of other people, and they're like, or I think they did like Angry Joe or something like that, and they were parodying like, oh, I lost my job at McDonald's and I didn't know what to do with myself or something like that. It's just for a person that was concerned with graduating college, I just don't know what he's going on about here. Like I don't. It's like he's creating his own death spiral.
Right.
Sorry, I found that video I was talking about, and I missed what we were last talking about, so I'll just
That's all
stay
right.
quiet.
I'll just carry on, and then we can buzz in at any time. But things are getting better, slowly. These days I struggle with bitterness and apathy. It's a constant uphill battle, and there are days I just don't feel like making that climb. I eke out a living, barely, on a freelance graphic design business in a small town where too many people know who and what I am. But that's your own fault because you decided to out yourself online. Now I have a bachelor's degree in journalism that I've never used, and I'm living, well, except for now, and I'm living well below the poverty line, existing on food stamps and the couple $100s I manage to scrape together every month, sometimes augmented with financial help from my parents if the bills get too high. I guarantee you've got people that love hearing the whole existing on food stamps thing. I can only imagine the things they would say about where their tax dollars are going.
Just wait for the next sentence.
I tried filing for disability over my arm and my emotional issues, but that was a no-go in my conservative southern state. Here we go. This is what a law-abiding pedophile has been reduced to in this society. Are you kidding me? Like, do you have to word it?
I'm confused. Is he equating that since he's a pedophile, he's not getting these resources? Like, is he? If he's like not been claimed, I don't know how somebody in the approval disapproval board would know that about him.
Yeah, like the only thing I'm going to give him is, okay, he does have a legitimate disability with being born without a hand. I mean, that's a problem. There's a lot of things you can't do thanks to that. And I can also see where it would be emotionally damaging on your mental health. So,
well, if he came in there and say, "Hey, I'm a pedophile, I want money."
Yeah, like, come on, who's going to...
But if he goes in there, I think the arm alone should be enough to get some disability.
I think so. I'm not really seeing, like, fight it, I mean, you have options.
I don't see Tennessee saying, or the state of Tennessee saying, go ask Obama for change. I just...
But also to blame it on conservative values. Like, really? So only conservatives think pedophilia is a bad thing?
Yeah, well... man, this is why I would not mind talking to this guy. I would not dog him out at all. I would just like more clarification for some of these things.
No, like I don't I don't want to attack anybody like outright, but I mean you gotta, just the way some of these things are framed, it's almost like I'm a pedophile and I'm being treated unfairly. But it's like, no, this is not. If you're somebody that makes the claim that, okay, you're a pedophile, you're never gonna act on it, then you don't need to out yourself to each and every individual on Earth. Like, live your life out in the open, but, like, keep this to the people that are helping you professionally.
Yeah, if you're a drug addict...
Yeah, you don't walk into a job interview and be like, well, I just got off heroin, so can we do this thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that self-victimization that is... a lot of the SJWs will do.
Oh,
it's not like he's black and getting discriminated from that because it's hard to cover up your nationality.
Right.
He literally has a mental disorder that I'm guessing he tells everybody about, and then is like, why does everybody hate me? I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't tell everybody about your sexual thoughts.
Right, and it's... like you were saying, it's that thing where the self-victimization, like, look at me, I have this problem, and everybody's judging me, but they're not taking into account that their problem is a severe danger to other people. Like, okay, you say you're not going to act on it, but like I said, on good faith, most people can't trust that when it's coming from a stranger, because it's a serious risk.
For sure, it's just I don't know. I wouldn't mind talking to this guy. I really don't see him as a monster. If it's true that he has never touched any children, and he has the self-control, I don't see him as a monster. I just see him as somebody that's trying to do SJW tactics and wondering why isn't this working.
Right. Well, what he said about like being a monster, that's his own take. Like, he's writing this article. He didn't have to frame it like, oh, everyone's going to view me as a monster. He could have just said very honestly, this is what I deal with. This is why I need help. Okay, and this is why it can be a problem for people that have these urges but have never acted on them.
Yeah, and I mean, somebody might have a bondage fetish, just because, like, I don't know. Maybe it's a little different, but a fetish for me is something different than your sexual orientation.
No, but I kind of see where you were going with it. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to tie up everybody they come across.
Yeah, if I like whips and chains, doesn't mean that when I hook up with a girl, I have to get the whips and chains and the butt plugs and you know,
Or
there's guidelines.
or it doesn't mean that after you play a quick half hour of Castlevania, you're going to be jerking off in the bathroom.
But but if you do need the butt plugs, Amazon has you covered. Please see my affiliate link in the description. No, this is what a law. Okay, yeah, I read that part. At times, I've wondered why I've even bothered to stay legal. Oh, this is nice. Maybe prison would be better, even at the risk of getting shanked as a short eyes. Okay, so I didn't know what short eyes meant. I looked it up, and apparently it's the well, at least on Urban Dictionary, it's the term for child molester in prison. Why, I'm not exactly sure, but okay.
Brittany's the term for a wimp or a wimp in prison too, something like that.
At least then it would be all over with. But alas, I could never hurt a child. No matter what, some small part of me still holds out hope that things will go back to
Oh God.
normal, or as close to normal as a celibate pedophile with little prospect of a future can get. Besides, like I said earlier, I just couldn't allow myself to foist this abomination onto another human being, so I simply endured it until... Uh-oh.
This is what kind of scares me.
Mhm.
Most pedophiles don't see themselves as hurting children.
Yeah.
I mean, all honesty, like if you talk to a pedophile and they molested or looked at a child in an inappropriate way, they don't see it as harming the child. They see it as them doing stuff with the child in like a playful way. For them, it's playing. It's playing doctor. It's playing checkup. It's playing. Let me see yours. I'll show you mine. Sort of bullshit.
Yeah, right, right.
And this is what scares me: is him justifying I would never hurt a child because I can guarantee that would be what 99% of legitimate child molesters would say that have pedophilic tendencies.
Yeah,
They
I
don't.
mean, they don't... I guess I would think that some probably just don't care, but like you said, it's like when you come across those really, those really deranged murderers or rapists, it's like they almost don't have the capacity to realize why their behavior is
Well,
disturbing or wrong.
well, for me, him saying like if he said I would never touch a child, that would be fine.
Hmm.
But him like it could be a Freudian slip. It could have just been like a random like word he used. He probably could just looked up similar definition words. Thesaurus. He probably could have done that. But to specifically say never hurt a child scares me. It makes me think he is willing to do things to children that we would consider hurting a child, but he wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean it's
It,
really
it,
like a definitions game at that point.
yeah, like if you were actually not wanting to hurt a child, you would say, "I would never touch a child or do anything inappropriate to a child." That's where the definition. That's where I think things separate, and it is in my head. It is something that I can't. Is possibly a fallacy on my part, but that's what scares me. So.
That's okay. We don't worry about those things around here.
Yeah, well, I admit to it. It's possibly a fallacy, but it just seems blatantly like contrived, blatantly obliquous term.
So we've
Well,
got
as long as no people with iPads start responding to your fallacy, I think you'll be okay.
so we've got Verped. I was still caught up in the same nonsense at the Pro Contactor forum last year when Ethan Edwards started posting at the forum. Actually, he'd been there for a while. I didn't take much. I don't know who this is exactly, but I think I'm gonna get to it in here. I didn't take much notice of him at first, but when I realized he was the constant target of the Pro Contactor's attacks, I sympathized with him and began to pay closer attention to his posts, realizing that he was an anti-contactor like me. They always have these weird terms like contactor, anti-contactor. He was there to win over people who were either on the fence about the contact issue or didn't agree with the pro-contactor's position, but had nowhere else to go to talk about their sexuality. Until now, because we are progressive. Ethan and his friend Nick Devon founded Virtuous Pedophiles on the
Sounds like a
no.
Metal Gear Solid organization.
Oh my god.
Cypher.
On the notion that pedos needed an alternative to those other forums, a place where they can feel comfortable and get the support they need without the pressure to support sketchy views about adult child sex. Hey, which hand was it that Ocelot lost again? No. Oh.
Wow. What wasn't it? I think it was his. Might have been his left. Let me see.
I think it was his left. I think he also lost his leg too, right?
He lost his mind.
That he did, and well, I think we're onto something there. But virtuous pedophiles, like really? That's like, oh my god, it just paints it as this innocent thing.
Our own
Like-
daddy daycare.
No, it was his right hand. It was his right hand that was cut off.
Nice.
Ocelot confirmed.
I really can't praise this organization enough. Well, go figure. It's been a lifesaver for me. I still get depressed and anxious sometimes. I feel better about myself and a little more hopeful about my future these days. Yeah, because like Salon is letting you write an article which argues to like normalize weird things. I have other pedophiles in my life that I'm actually proud to call friends. People I would trust my children with if I had any, knowing they'd be safe there. Are you kidding me right now? Many, like Ethan, have raised families of their own or are still doing so. A large number of them are quite young. Despite the prevailing stereotype of the dirty old man, the average age of posters at VP hovers around mid-20s. I'm so glad that younger folks are flocking to Virtuous Pedophiles, where they can get the coaching and support that was not available to us older pedos at their age. It'll make all the difference as they settle into themselves and learn to accept who they are. See, learn to accept who they are. Like,
if you can,
I mean,
Nothing-
I know what you're gonna say. Like, acceptance is part of it. Like, it's kind of part of coming to terms with your issue.
yeah, but it's the way you accept it.
Yeah, like,
I can accept I'm a mass murderer by killing as many people as I
and then you can continue to do it because you accepted it.
Yeah.
Well, he acknowledged it was problematic, and therefore it's okay to continue.
This is a bad thing, so I just go ahead with it.
uh,
But I think I would not agree with this at all. I think if you have these tendencies, yeah, you could treat it like AA, which I have no problem with, but
Mhm.
call it virtuous pedophiles and go with people that probably have no psychology.
like degrees or anything or training.
Yeah, I mean, sure, like, and outreach programs like that would help, but with AA, you have people there that, focus on becoming better about, like, I'm not going to check out this site.
They've got a 12-step program. Damn it, like where's
Yeah.
where's the 12-step I won't touch any kids program?
Well, I'm certainly convinced.
If they had like hotlines where it's like, look, like suicide hotlines but for pedophilias, sure, I can agree with that. No problem. If you feel like you're having a hard time controlling certain urges, if they had like a hotline where somebody could talk you down.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
And
But this sounds like a group of people that are just like, they're like, oh well, we all realize what we are, but we're not going to act on it. So let's just sit here and indulge in our little fantasies and not really
Yeah.
get at the core of what's wrong.
If this is like a 4chan like board sort of thing where you just talk about, like, if it's not actually helping anybody, I don't agree with it. If it's not seeking counseling, if they had like a board, these are counselors that would help you if
Right.
you have this problem. They won't. These are counselors that I've talked to. I would agree with it. I would be like,
What
yes.
I think it's helping them do, and I use the word help for a lack of a better term, is feel like they have someone to connect with rather than they're like improving upon their situation. It's just like, oh, I know other people like me. It's okay now. I have a bond.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
my other concern with it is he doesn't do a good job of explaining if this group is strictly because it sounds like they're not. He doesn't do a good job of saying if they are strictly anti-contact or pro. So
Mm,
that gives the impression that they think that you can be a virtuous pedophile and be in favor of contacting children, which the whole idea of them calling it virtuous pedophiles, especially given the founders' history, alleged history, is that they're so-called virtuous because they don't believe in touching children. They just have an urge that they need to discuss and have an open forum for. So now it's going all kinds of contradictory uh,
it.
and it doesn't give any sense of credibility to the organization as even just a place where they can just air out their issues and come to terms with it.
Well, if this is something to perpetuate their feelings and not work on their feelings, is should be shut down. But with the censorship thing, I'm not for censorship. If people like, if this is just a thing about pedophiles talking to other pedophiles and not actually help themselves, I do not agree with this, and it should be maybe not censored but investigated.
right. So, all right. So we've got a couple more uh, sections left, and try to get. We got about 24 minutes or so. Let's try to get and kind of do like a final thoughts thing. I mean, we can still do some commentary on this stuff. Verped, why do they have to like abbreviate everything? Itself has become the go-to place for support for non-offending pedophiles, which still doesn't actually mean that they are completely not in favor of acting on it. It just means they haven't been caught or have yet to act on it, and has been mentioned and endorsed everywhere from NPR, Salon, and The Atlantic to the New York Times and Toronto Star. As its popularity increases, so too does its effectiveness. There are still holdouts, people who believe that pedophilic feelings should be crammed down into the most subterranean recesses of ourselves, never to be discussed in the open, but these folks are going the way of the dodo bird. Are they? Are they really? Anyway, we've tried that. Take it from someone who has firsthand, no pun intended, experience. It not only doesn't work, it tends to make things far worse. Please repeat this mantra to yourself. A repressed, unhappy pedophile is a pedophile at risk. I'm gonna pass on that because this sentence, like the way he's talking about this is there's like multiple different ways to go at it, and it's like, oh, as its popularity increases, so too does its effectiveness. I would argue the opposite. I mean, if this is like a community for these type of people and it's getting more popular, what the fuck does that say about like our society and the people in it?
I don't know. I have something to say, but I'm gonna save it for the end.
All right, and then like, okay, it doesn't work, it makes things far worse. No, this guy, he didn't try. He tried self-repression. He didn't there and like seek real help from the sound of this article. Like perhaps he's been to a therapist, I don't know. But from the way this article is going, he has not. He tried to drug himself. That's it.
Yeah, self-medication is definitely the worst thing you could possibly do if you have a mental problem. Um, Many cases, self-medication leads to worsening effects in the desired outcome. Like it may help temporarily,
Yeah.
but it's like antibiotic steroids. It causes your body to stop producing those chemicals in your brain that are out of whack. And so people that get off of steroids, they end up developing female breasts.
Mm.
They
Oh yeah, it causes like an imbalance in the hormones.
yeah, your body stops producing it because you're getting it artificially, and that's why a lot of why I disagree with giving kids drugs of that sort,
Mm.
like well, not antidepressants, but like ADHD medication, stuff like that. But till they're at least a certain age. But Yeah, this whole thing is kind of scary to me at this point.
This next part is pretty disgusting. Those individuals who have the courage to come forward and lay claim to this affliction with the understanding that they only want to use their pedo powers for good should be commended, not hated and feared. So they're doing that thing where they're going to tell us how we're supposed to feel about somebody else's feelings and somebody else's thoughts and actions. Like, the only good answer to this is commend and not hate, not fear. And like it's a courageous thing to do. And what the hell is a pedo power? I mean, are you serious?
Is that like retard strength?
Should they really be? Should he really be making light of it in that way right now when it like he's claiming it's such a huge taboo that he wants like understanding for?
And pedo power just already has like pedophilia is not like saying
No, it's not a
woman
good
power.
word in and of itself. It's like you're I don't
It's
know.
not saying like women empowerment or women power, women's strength. It's not like that, which I can agree with for the most part. This is just saying murderistic power activates. Like what would happen if you combine those two terms?
Oh man. You can't imagine how difficult it is to tell people you're a pedophile. I'm pretty sure I could imagine. Even a non-offending one, and even if those people are other pedos. Truly, the very concept of a pedophile who neither molests nor wants to molest children is often anathema to people's way of thinking. The long-held belief that pedophiles are destined to abuse kids is a tough one to overcome, yet many of us get just as upset as, if not more upset than, non-pedophiles when we read accounts of sexual abuse, not only because we hate when one of the little people we love most suffers, but also because whenever yet another pedophile is arrested, it only enforces the reigning paradigm of the pedo as ticking time bomb. Um,
Was that it?
Little people we love the most. Oh my god, that just comes off really wrong given the
That
situation here.
that seems to go with what I said earlier about
Yeah,
that
it's like that weird inkling of
inside.
something messed up. For better or worse, mostly worse, I'd like to know where the better ever comes in. We have this sexuality, and unlike with most sexualities, there is no ethical way we can fully actualize our sexual longings. Our desires and feelings, if we are to remain uptight, are doomed from the outset. Indeed, whereas the majority of crimes can be bounced back from, society doesn't extend a mulligan to molesters. I mean, you've got murderers and rapists, too, that don't really... I mean, technically would be rape if you're a molester. I understand why, but that doesn't make the burden any lighter to bear, particularly for those who have who have minimal or no attraction to adults. And for the pedos who are lucky enough to be able to form working relationships with adults, there are a new set of concerns. What if we have children? Will I be a threat to them? Can I ever share this fact with my spouse? Can I... Well, I mean, you're sharing it with everybody else. Why not? Can I ever love and want her as much as I do a child? That is disturbing. So please be understanding and supportive. It's really all we ask of you. Treat us like people with a massive handicap we must overcome, not as a molester. If we're going to make it in the world without offending, we need your help. Listening to me was a start. So, all right, then on the flip side of this, that means that this guy would and their so-called community would need to listen to society's side of this and realize that, okay, so you've got a problem, you want to be treated like you have a handicap, then you need to, rather than hanging out on the internet and discussing your fantasies or your sexual attraction, you need to do your best to seek out help and overcome it and not act on it and be a regular, productive member of society.
Well, if I could say one thing, just in sum of this whole article,
Sure.
if anybody's reading this and they do have these tendencies, me personally, I do not see you as a monster. I'm talking to any individuals like that right now. But what you need to do is not go on forums and chat sites of other people that have the problem. You really need to seek professional help. I have mental problems.
As do
Like,
I, so I'm not even gonna, deny it. I've been to a therapist. I've tried medication. Whatever, no shame. Who gives a shit?
it sucks to have to rely on other people. It really
It
does.
also,
But
and I can even speak for like being worried about how you're going to be judged, because there are people that will even judge you on lesser mental health issues. So,
Yeah.
there is definitely a lack of understanding when it comes to mental health issues in general. But with something like this, it's really important. Sure, okay, non-offending, we're never going to harm anybody. Okay. But they have to understand the flip side, where your preference is a danger to people that cannot defend themselves properly, cannot consent to your come-ons. It's a little bit different than the standard mental health stigma, if you will.
But I guarantee you, if you have problems with these, going for the internet like you would go on WebMD is not the way to do it. You really need to see people, and that's the best way to get help for other people too. I mean, you have to see help.
Yeah.
You can't experiment with drugs. You can't. Like, just imagine if you're experimenting with drugs and a kid was at a party there, like
Yeah,
not in the
your
right
like
mindset.
inhibitions are,
You're not gonna be able to control yourself. You're not. You have to understand one thing, that there is a power placement. There's a power placement. You have authority over this person, just like in the military or teaching fields. If you're a teacher or an officer, you have authority over people. You can't abuse that
yeah,
authority.
and especially children are taught in general to respect authority, and therefore that right there kind of like frames it in a way that the kid is in danger, because more often than not they're going to go with what they're taught.
Yeah, like children in general will
E-
listen to adults,
right,
and
even if it's something they want to act against, they might go with it just out of fear of repercussions, because in general they know it's wrong to they know it's wrong to say no to an authority figure.
yeah. And to anybody else that knows of kids that have been affected, like by stuff like this. Even if you're a kid now and you can remember a time, like even if you're 12, 13 years old and something like that happened to this guy, which I really think also needs to seek medical, like mental health evaluation. Not
Definitely.
that he's sick, not that he's bad, but I really think that he would serve a lot better if he just talked to a therapist, um, talk to somebody about outreach for this. Even if you're a child, seek therapy, even if it doesn't seem like it should be mandatory for these kids that get like molested by teachers, even if they're boys and they get molested by cheerleaders and shit. Like they should still seek mental health guidance from it, because it will affect you later on in life.
Right.
So I don't know this guy personally. I tried looking him up, could only find like a quick little message board where he was talking about pedophile activism.
Yeah, there wasn't very much info from the quick Google search that I did before the show.
And that's what I was kind of hoping to see in this article, was just I was hoping to see something besides just deal with us at the very end. I was hoping for him to say, "Hey, seek counseling. Don't
I
dismiss
was
this."
hoping to maybe see him say, "I'm seeking counseling." Like, he's claiming to understand why it's bad and why it's a problem in society, but yet he's not taking any steps to really actively do anything other than like, just take me on my word, I'm a non-offending pedophile. Like
Right,
I'm
dude. Now go ahead and listen to me talk about how you guys need to respect me and allow me to do whatever I want.
the the
Look,
the problem is where like you can tell that he is damaged by this simply in the way that he romanticizes that first encounter when he was 7 years old.
well, for me, non-offending pedophile sounds a lot like a functioning alcoholic.
Yeah.
That's
Right,
what,
it's somebody that's like, okay, I know I have a problem, but since I can still do everything that I would normally do when I'm drinking, I'm going to keep drinking even though I'm destroying my liver and such.
yeah, there's gonna be underlying issues that you've. I mean, I get this guy, like, if he like, I'm gonna take him on his word that he has never harmed a child in his life, like by his own words. I'm gonna say I'm not gonna take that in context. I'm gonna just assume he's never harmed a child or touched inappropriately a child in any way. He should really still seek help because it's a ticking time bomb, honestly. Like,
And he even keeps saying that, but he's he's missing the point. He keeps presenting it as if you don't respect him, he's going to be a ticking time bomb, but he already is one.
yeah,
Right, because in the article he was saying like, "Oh, we're not all ticking time bombs, but if you oppress us and push us into the dark recesses of society, we're going to act out." It's like a, I don't know, it's like an underhanded threat.
yeah, that's definitely like mind manipulation sort of way. But look, the best way you can help you and your friends that also have the same problem is to seek help, to get more awareness into this, and that's the best way. You don't want the some pedo molested another child awareness. You want these guys are going to seek help and they haven't molested a child awareness. These guys have recognized that they have a problem and they want to see help, and it's helping. That's what people want to see. That's the positive correlation you can get from this, because you're not going to get any correlation with, oh, we're on this web board with other pedophiles. Eventually you're gonna get caught up. Is you're not gonna seek any help from it at all. Nothing.
Another thing is like, somebody on that forum is going to do something screwed up. And then
Of course.
that community is going to be shut down, and you're going to lose your so-called little help forum community. And then what? It's society's fault, and you're going to say, well, we have nowhere to go, and so now we can't help but act out. I mean, you could be actively seeking help for your thing, but no, instead, like, you're on here on this website writing this article, and you added a lot of fluff, you added a lot of stuff to make it very sympathetic in your direction, which, everybody has hardships in life, but it doesn't justify our vices. You still have to, regardless of what happens to you in your life or what you go through, you still have to battle with yourself, no matter who you are. In some sense, you still have to battle with yourself to be a good person. um, I understand why somebody, like, why they might need to have this discussion, as much as I hate to say that, because people always say, well, we need to have this discussion, but nobody ever says what the solution is. I'm surprised, like, Salon didn't preface this, or at least, like, end it with a, if you or someone is having these urges, please seek some kind of help. Because when they leave it in this context, it's just like, well, this guy acknowledges it, so, we're totally cool with him posting here.
Well, some things this guy says scare me. They worry me. I, s- I was a business major. I just switched to psychiatrics or
Mm-hmm.
psychology. To become a psychiatric technician. And a lot of this stuff does scare me the way he says it. I'm not by any means a professional. I'm just a year one college student again. So, but it really does. And I don't know. I think the best thing this guy can do is just seek help. Just not that he's a monster. If
No,
if you want to
because
kill somebody, I would say the same thing. If you
right,
wanted to hurt yourself, I would say the same thing.
seeking help doesn't inherently mean you are a bad person. In fact, I would argue it means otherwise, because it means that you have an issue that could potentially be a danger to you or someone else, so you are actively trying to prevent that from becoming a problem.
Yeah. I mean, there's a thousand and one unlimited number of situations that could get you in trouble.
I know that think topics like this, it gets into, like, the slippery slope of like, thought policing and whatnot. But at the same time, while people may be all for freedom of speech and whatnot, you still have to recognize that there are certain thoughts and attitudes that are dangerous, and that doesn't necessarily mean we need to police the thoughts themselves, because you can't control what other people are going to think, but you have to recognize where there are potential issues, and then people need to seek the proper help based on that.
But that, and I don't know. I don't agree with majority of this article so far. Well,
Yeah,
overall,
it's over. Thank God.
I missed out a couple of it, but I found that video that I was talking about, the Joe Rogan.
All right,
Um, yeah, I put it into the Skype if you wanted to
all right.
post it for people to see.
I'll check that out.
I hope it's the right one. I kind of had to like quickly listen to it while you guys were talking, but I believe this is the right one. This guy had a similar experience. Like he was raped as a child,
Mhm.
and he had to go through hell and back just to get some of these pedophiles like to be put behind bars.
I just have I have a very yeah, okay, the guy hasn't broken any laws, but I have a very hard time being sympathetic to the abuser. Okay, so he's not an abuser yet, but I'm just speaking in general.
Yeah.
Like, I think the first instinct is to defend the people that can't defend themselves. This is an adult. This is a grown man. He knows the difference between right and wrong. It's his job to actively seek out help to make sure that he doesn't cross that line that nobody should cross. The thing here is not to normalize and remove the stigma in the sense that this is an acceptable sexuality that we need to integrate into society. It's to allow for discussion in the hopes that we can actually get people help so that they can function without acting on these kinds of urges and getting to the root of what causes them. It's not. I hate that we're like in this era of accept everything or you're a bigot.
Yeah, well, I can accept this guy's, like, he called it a handicap. I can accept that notion. Just like I can accept somebody that has, thoughts about suicide or, murdering people.
Mm.
As long as I seek help on it, they're not bad people for in any sense. But you're not, like, I can't see you as a complete person if you don't seek help for it. And even in the military, it's a big thing with mental health. Like, having a mental problem just seems like something that's beyond your control that you can't fix on your own.
Yeah.
Is considered like taboo to, not even to like people outside, but to people to themselves. Is always
Yeah,
like a
it's.
taboo thing.
I mean, it's not easy. So I do understand that aspect of it, but I don't. The answer here is not to normalize. It's to find the root of the problem and then fix it in the best way possible.
Well, if by normalize you mean to understand.
Well, yeah. There's a
Yeah.
but the social justice normalize is very different from the
Yeah.
standard definition.
Well, I think to understand better
Yeah.
is the way you want to go. To understand what caused this would be better. To find the root cause would help out a lot more. And medical advances happen every day. It seems like psychiatric advances happen a lot slower and always have multiple people with multiple theories that are hard to prove. So
Yeah, it does seem to be
differently.
a harder thing to understand and get to the root of. I mean, that's why there's no one cure for depression and all those things. All right, so we are coming up on the end of the broadcast time. Does anybody have any final thoughts that they can't live without sharing before we go?
Um, I think I said enough.
Okay.
I don't have anything.
Okay. Well, in that case, we're going to end the broadcast on a lighthearted note. So we're going to tell a little joke. What do you call? Yes.
We're
What?
gonna talk about right wingers.
No, we're going to tell a real joke. What do you call a line of kids in Subway? Or kids? What do you call a bunch of kids online in Subway?
I don't know. What do you call a bunch of kids online in a subway?
Jared's cheat day.
Oh shit.
Okay. Thank you and good night, folks.
Drop the mic.